Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I continue bringing you a new video about Tien. Please stay tuned and don't miss the upcoming videos on my channel. Under the light drizzle of the early spring days, the sky seemed to be covered with a thin veil of mist, gentle and calm. Tiny raindrops fell onto the tin roof, tapping in a steady rhythm that echoed through the quiet countryside. The small farmhouse remained lit, its warm yellow light glowing through the window like a peaceful anchor in the damp, chilly weather. Inside, the warmth from the kitchen spread through the house, blending with the scent of freshly cooked rice and wood smoke, making anyone who stepped in feel an immediate sense of closeness and familiarity. In the kitchen, Tien busily prepared dinner. Her hands moved swiftly as she washed vegetables, sliced meat, and carefully adjusted the seasoning. It wasn't that the meal was extravagant, but she always wanted everything to be as complete and thoughtful as possible. Outside on the porch, the spring breeze brushed through the garden, shaking the rain-soaked leaves. In the front yard, her husband was still focused on finishing the remaining work. In the first days of the year, farm work never truly paused, and neither did he, always trying to finish everything before thinking about himself. Knowing he was so absorbed that he might forget the time, Tien gently wiped her hands on her apron and poured a glass of warm water. Steam rose softly from the cup, carrying a bit of warmth into the damp afternoon air. She stepped outside and spoke in her usual gentle, caring tone. "Take a break and have some water. Dinner is almost ready." Her simple words blended with the sound of falling rain, not loud, but enough to reach the man immersed in his work. He looked up and accepted the cup from her hands. His eyes reflected quiet gratitude, without the need for many words. In that moment, it seemed as though all the fatigue had softened. Just a cup of warm water and a gentle reminder, yet it was enough to warm the heart amid life's busyness. That evening's meal was not lavish. On the tray were braised pork bones with kohlrabi, tender and fragrant, green peas stir-fried with smoked meat, rich in flavor, and a plate of fresh greens picked from their own backyard. Each dish carried the familiar taste of rural life, simple yet sincere. They sat across from each other at the small wooden table, listening to the raindrops still falling softly outside the porch. The space was not large, but it was filled with a sense of togetherness. As they ate, they talked. He spoke about the first rain of the year as a good omen, mentioning the weather forecast for the coming days and hoping the rain would arrive at the right time for the crops to grow well. Tien listened, nodding and smiling from time to time. She talked about her mother returning soon from a long trip and about inviting Uncle Dung over for a New Year visit so everyone could sit together and catch up. Their small conversations flowed naturally, nothing too important, yet they made the meal warmer than ever. Her husband occasionally added more food to her bowl, reminding her to eat a little more. Tien gently offered him the better portions in return. There were no flowery words, no grand gestures, just quiet, steady care. In that rustic space, love did not need to be spoken aloud, it was present in every glance and every small action. When the meal ended, Tien stood up to clean up. The soft clinking of dishes blended with the sound of rain outside, forming a familiar rhythm of an early spring evening. He watched her silhouette in the kitchen, his eyes carrying a thoughtful look. Then suddenly, he spoke in a calm voice that held a hint of barely concealed excitement. "Change your clothes in a bit. I'm taking you somewhere." Tien paused for a moment. It was still raining outside, and the village road must be wet. She briefly thought he might want to visit someone or stop by a familiar place for a New Year greeting. Curiosity mixed with surprise made her look at him a little longer, but he simply smiled and said nothing more. She changed into neat clothes and put on a light jacket. When they stepped outside, the rain had softened, falling like mist. The motorbike rolled slowly along the familiar narrow road, the yellow headlights reflecting off the wet surface in shimmering streaks. Sitting behind him, Tien still had many questions, yet she felt the gentleness in the way he carefully drove through the drizzle. When the bike stopped in front of a photo studio, she was truly surprised. The brightly lit sign stood out in the damp evening. Tien looked at him with wide eyes. In that moment, she realized he had quietly prepared this in advance. It wasn't an ordinary visit, but a special date, a New Year commemorative photo session for the two of them. Amid the lingering spring rain, amid the simple rhythm of farm life and daily worries, he still chose to give her such a small surprise. And that very surprise continued the quiet affection of their dinner earlier, adding a gentle yet unforgettable mark to their story on that early spring night. For the first time in her life, Tien wore a traditional red dye. The red was not dazzling or overly bright, but warm and deep, much like her own quiet life in the peaceful countryside. When the dress was carefully adjusted on her shoulders and the soft fabric flowed gracefully with each step, she lowered her gaze and looked at herself, a feeling rising within her that she could hardly put into words. Until now, she had been used to simple clothes, outfits practical for housework and tending the garden. Never had she imagined that one day she would stand in a brightly lit studio, wearing such a feminine and traditional garment. Her makeup was done gently, just enough to enhance the natural features of her face. It was not heavy or bold, just a light layer of powder, a touch of fresh pink lipstick, and a subtle emphasis on her eyes. When the makeup artist stepped back and smiled, inviting her to look into the mirror, Tien paused in surprise. The reflection before her left her momentarily speechless. The woman in the mirror was still her, but softer, more graceful, and different enough to make her own heart quietly tremble. She reached up and lightly touched her cheek, as if to make sure this was not a fleeting dream. Under the warm yellow lights, the red dye stood out even more, making her face glow with newfound radiance. Standing behind her, her husband watched in silence. His eyes could not hide his pride and emotion. Perhaps in that moment, he too was seeing another side of the woman who had stood beside him through so many days and months. "I didn't think you would look this beautiful in an dye." His words were simple, without flowery language, yet so sincere that Tien shyly lowered her head. She was not used to being praised, much less to being the center of attention. Yet the way he looked at her made her understand that what he cherished was not only her appearance today, but everything she had quietly nurtured and devoted to their family over time. Against the soft-lit studio backdrop, they held hands. These were the same hands that had worked together in the fields, cleaned the house side by side, and supported each other through stressful days. Now they were gently clasped within a formal frame. They smiled, not stiffly, but naturally, just like their life together. At times they looked into the camera, at other times they gazed ahead, as if looking toward a new chapter waiting for them. Those photographs were not merely images captured on film. They marked the journey they had walked together. A year filled with challenges and pressure, moments when exhaustion nearly overwhelmed them. Yet through it all, they chose to stay by each other's side, to listen and to understand. Every moment before the lens seemed to reflect the path they had traveled, imperfect, not overly glamorous, but steadfast and sincere. When the photo session ended, Tien still felt light and uplifted. She stepped outside in her red dye. The rain had completely stopped, leaving only the gentle dampness of the early spring night. Streetlights reflected on the still wet ground, creating a scene both quiet and warm. Her husband looked at her once more, as if wanting to hold that image in his memory for a long time. They stopped at a small drink shop nearby. The shop was modest, but decorated with a strong Tet atmosphere, neatly arranged bonchon on the table, red cuplets hanging along the walls, and branches of pale pink peach blossoms placed in ceramic vases. The space carried the breath of the early new year, both familiar and festive. Sitting together, they ordered 2 warm drinks. Steam rose from the cups, blending with the cool night air. Tien gently smoothed the flowing fabric of her áo dai, still not fully accustomed to the feeling. She spoke about the meaning of the áo dai, a symbol of the gentle beauty and modesty of Vietnamese women. Since childhood, she had seen others wear it on special occasions, but never imagined she would one day experience such a moment herself. Her voice was soft, tinged with shyness as she admitted it was her first time wearing makeup and having such carefully arranged photos taken. Her husband listened, his gaze softening. He said that although they had gone through many ups and downs and faced countless pressures, it was peaceful moments like this that mattered most. Not grand achievements, but the simple act of sitting beside each other, sharing a smile, and clearly feeling that neither of them was alone on the road ahead. Outside, the spring night quietly drifted on. In the small tet-themed shop, 2 people sat side by side, sharing honest thoughts. The red áo dai still stood out under the warm lights, a vivid highlight of an evening that had begun with a surprise at the studio. From the simple dinner in their farmhouse, to the photo session, and finally to this quiet moment together, everything seemed to weave itself into a complete memory of the early days of the year, gentle, profound, and filled with love. Sitting in the small drink shop, still surrounded by the lingering colors of Tet, they continued the conversation that had begun when they left the studio. After the New Year commemorative photos and the heartfelt reflections about the red áo dai, their talk gradually turned toward plans for the year ahead. Not grand ambitions or distant dreams, but simple intentions closely tied to life on the farm, where each day was connected to the soil, the crops, and the steady rhythm of modest living. They discussed raising a few more animals at the farm, perhaps some new chickens to fill the yard with cheerful crowing each morning, or a small flock of ducks to make the pond behind the house more lively. Tien spoke about tending the vegetable garden more carefully, planting new rows, and trying seasonal crops so their family meals could become more varied. She hoped the garden would not only provide food, but also be a place where she could step outside each afternoon, breathe deeply, and set aside her worries for a while. Her husband listened and nodded. He said that in this new year, what he wished for most was not accomplishing major achievements, but slowing down a little, worrying less, and not allowing outside pressures to pull him too far away. The months behind them had taught him that if one only chased work and forgot the feelings of the person beside them, then no achievement would ever feel complete. That was why he wanted to maintain a balanced pace with Tien, working diligently, but never losing the peaceful moments they shared. Their conversation eventually touched on the lingering tensions between her mother and Thursday, stories revolving around money, friendship, and trust, things that seemed ordinary yet often weighed heavily on the heart. Tien shared that she did not want matters to grow more complicated. She simply hoped that any misunderstandings would eventually be resolved, so everyone could move forward with lighter hearts. For her, family and inner peace mattered most. Her husband understood. He knew that life outside was filled with competition and friction. At times, people had to face calculations, gossip, and invisible pressures. Yet he also knew that Tien longed for simplicity. She did not seek rivalry or grand ambitions, only a gentle life where each day they could look at one another and smile. As the spring rain thinned, they sat with their glasses of fresh orange juice. The soft orange hue stood out beneath the shop's warm yellow lights. The coolness of the spring night added a refreshing chill to the drink, yet between them there was an indescribable warmth. They looked at each other quietly, without needing many words. Sometimes, understanding is not found in promises, but in the choice to stay, to listen, and to hold hands. There were no extravagant vows about the distant future, no overly detailed plans. Just modest intentions and simple wishes, to continue sharing warm meals in their small kitchen, to occasionally preserve a few photographs as reminders of moments past, and when sadness or unfinished matters arose, to sit beside each other and talk things through. From the early spring dinner in their farmhouse, to the commemorative photos in the brightly lit studio, and finally to this quiet moment in a small tet-themed shop, everything seemed woven into one continuous flow. These were not extraordinary events, but fragments of everyday life. Yet it was precisely those fragments that gave life meaning. Perhaps true happiness does not lie in grand achievements. It is not in noisy celebrations or accomplishments that make others admire you. Happiness is finding someone who pours you a glass of warm water when you are too absorbed in work to notice the time, someone who holds your hand before a camera to preserve a shared memory, and someone who steps into a new year with you, carrying a simple yet steady faith. That faith is not elaborate or lofty. As long as they remain by each other's side, holding on to sincerity and understanding, then whatever challenges lie ahead, their hearts will always have a place to rest. And beneath the lingering spring rain on the porch roof, under the warm lights of the small shop, the two of them understood that the most precious thing they possessed was companionship, quiet yet enduring, strong enough to guide them through another new season with gentle hearts and peaceful minds. And so, the story of Tien and her husband on this early spring day comes to a close here. Amid the gentle drizzle of the New Year days, beside a simple meal of garden vegetables, smoked meat, and tender braised kohlrabi, they chose to give each other the most sincere things. Not luxurious gifts, not grand promises, just a commemorative photo session, a tight hand in hand, and peaceful wishes for the year ahead. Perhaps outside there are still pressures, unfinished matters, and worries about money, work, and relationships. But when one returns home and finds someone waiting by a warm meal, with loving eyes quietly watching over them, that is already enough. In early spring, the rain falls so that trees may sprout and bloom. And in the human heart, as long as there is understanding and sharing, happiness will quietly take root in the same way. Thank you for accompanying today's story. If you also believe that happiness begins with the simplest things, leave a comment to wish their little family a year of favorable weather, peace, and fulfillment. And don't forget to watch the next episode to continue following the journey of Tien and her husband, where simple moments will keep writing even more meaningful memories in the new year.
Hello mọi người, xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Thì hôm nay mình tiếp tục đưa đến hôm nay là lần đầu tiên mà mình làm cho kênh kia của mình nó có một chút vấn đề, nên là mình tạo kênh mới. Hy vọng là mọi người sẽ tiếp tục ủng hộ cho kênh này của mình nha. Hôm nay thì mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người câu chuyện của Tử Tiên nhé mọi người. Hôm nay thì mình mới đang làm. Hôm nay thì Tử Tiên và Jack đi chụp ảnh Tết, chụp ảnh xuân đó mọi người. Ở bên mình thì là Tết âm lịch nên là sẽ ăn Tết theo lịch âm lịch. Và bây giờ thì ở âm lịch thì bây giờ mới bắt đầu Tết, nên là bây giờ ở chỗ mình là mới tính là sang năm mới. Còn có thể ở bên nước mọi người thì là sang năm mới từ rất lâu rồi. Cảm ơn mọi người rất nhiều vì đã theo dõi video hôm nay, và mong rằng mọi người sẽ đăng ký kênh và ủng hộ cho video tiếp theo trên kênh của mình vào ngày mai và những ngày sau đó nhé. Tạm biệt.